Chapter 573. Yu Qianqiu revealed an expression of, "You don't understand me," and solemnly replied, "Don't look down on me just because I do things in a flashy manner. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm actually a very low-key person. Women belong to me. I am sincere to each of them. I don't need to show them off just to prove that I am a man. I only told you this because you asked me. Otherwise, I would have kept my mouth shut." B****, you're speaking in such a dignified way. Nongzhu said word by word with hatred, "You're shameless." "You mean me?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at his own nose, a look of confusion on his face. He didn't know what kind of medicine this fellow had eaten to fall out with him just like that. He retorted angrily, "No matter how shameless I am, I didn't do that kind of thing." He was not like some people who thought that they looked impressive and went around swindling people, fooling around with each person they played with. If you ask him to count how many women he has played with in his life, I'm afraid he can't even count himself. How could he be qualified to criticize others? What the hell? I've never seen such a shameless person before. Bah! Bang, bang. Nongzhu turned the table upside down. The tableware such as bowls, chopsticks and plates fell on the ground. She pointed at him and shouted, "Who are you talking about?" When Yu Qianqiu turned hostile, he was also someone who wouldn't be swayed by force or persuasion. He immediately sneered and said, "I'm talking about whoever did that kind of thing. Poor thing." In the Moon sect, Qianghua lonely shadow faced Leng Hanyue. Missing you but not seeing you. Women met but didn't know each other. Heartbroken, year after year. It's so miserable. I don't know who did it. I dare you to say it again. Nongzhu shouted angrily. It seemed that she was about to hit him. He. Mr. Nongzhu, you are famous in the world. You are very powerful. I can't afford to offend you, but I can hide from you. I won't say it. Yu Qianqiu put on an expression of trying to keep the peace. He glanced at the mess on the ground, shook his head and sighed, hoeing the fields at noon, sweat dripping into the soil. Who would have thought that every single grain of food on the plate was so hard? Damn it, your father really knows how to talk. It's just a pity that this land is full of food. Nongzhu let out a muffled groan. She held her chest and staggered a step back. She bumped into the chair behind her and sat down. His face was pale as he panted heavily. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Yu Qianqiu without blinking. Today, he finally witnessed what it meant to be sharp-tongued. His head buzzed, and he felt the blood in his chest rising. He almost spat something out because he couldn't hold it in. His lips were tightly shut, and he couldn't speak even if he wanted to. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He secretly smacked his tongue and reflected on himself. Oh my God. Back then, I made a nascent soul cultivator vomit blood in Angquangsung. Am I going to make a soul formation cultivator vomit blood today? The higher the cultivation, the better the ability to piss people off. Wasn't it a bit too much? After all, he was not an outsider. But he shouldn't have gone too far. He also understood that people who had reached such a high level of cultivation would have opened up all the blocked meridians long ago. It was a small matter for them to be injured. But once they were so angry that they vomited blood, it would be a big problem. They were even more terrible than ordinary people. If their qi and blood were in disorder, their meridians would be damaged. It was not much different from being possessed by the devil during cultivation. It would take a long time to recuperate if it was light. But if it was heavy, their cultivation would be destroyed. It was not a joke. Don't be angry. If you want to scold me, I'll let you scold me. I won't fight back when you hit me or scold me. Yu Qianqiu sincerely admitted his mistake. Then he asked weakly, "Are you all right?" Nongzhu's hand that had just been put down pressed on his chest again. His chest was rising and falling rapidly. He quickly closed his eyes, put his hands in his dantian, and silently ran his qi to regulate his breath. How could he be angry like this? Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he covered his mouth immediately. He was afraid that he couldn't help but say something else. However, he didn't expect that Nongju, who was so thick-skinned, couldn't stand the provocation. He was so surprised that he didn't dare to speak easily. After all, he was not someone else. If something bad happened to him because of his anger, he couldn't explain it when he went back. After a long time, Nongju's flushed face gradually returned to normal. He slowly breathed out and opened his eyes. He stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing there obediently for a while. Suddenly, he showed an expression that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He sat there alone, shaking his head and giggling. He had never thought that someone could actually anger him to this extent. Good Lord! Every word was like a knife, piercing the soft spot. It was really a deep attack. Even his cultivation at the middle stage of Huashan realm almost couldn't bear it. Who would believe it? His smile didn't matter, but it scared Yu Qianqiu. Was he so angry that he became stupid? That would be a big sin. Yu Qianqiu was a little scared and asked carefully, "Senior Nongju, are you okay?" He asked the question 3 times, but he was still giggling. He was completely panicked. He flashed over and grabbed Nongju's wrist to check his body. Bang! Nongju slapped his hand away, stood up, and scolded him fiercely, "What are you doing? You want me to die early, don't you? Let me tell you, it's impossible for me to die. Even if you die, I will still be alive and kicking. Damn, I'm so angry." Yes, I was wrong," Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed, patted his chest and said, "Damn, I was scared to death." When he was too angry, he became much calmer and didn't think so impulsively. Nongju regained his calmness. Looking at him with a lingering fear, a trace of warmth flashed through his eyes, and then he became indifferent again. He said, "It's rare. You didn't want me to die early. What are you talking about? I'm so honest. I burn incense and pray for you whenever I have the time, and I wish for nothing more than for you to live a long and healthy life." Yu Qianqiu said these kind words in a heartwarming manner. He was truly afraid that this paper-thin guy would do something bad again. Now he found that Nongju's mental age was really different from his actual age. Wasn't he being childish? Stop. Nongju was angry and funny at the same time. She said, "You are so busy, and you still have time to burn incense and pray for me? What were you doing just now?" Yu Qianqiu wanted to defend himself, but he was worried that Nongju would be irritated again. So he swallowed his words and corrected himself. He said, yes. I deeply recognize my mistake, and I will change. I'm sure you will be satisfied. Is it really karma? Haha. This is fate. Nongju shook her head helplessly. Glancing at the mess on the ground, she relaxed and stared at Yu Qianqiu. She sighed and said, "Don't talk nonsense anymore. I have something to tell you. You can tell Z when you find the right opportunity. I believe you can seize this opportunity." Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled face and asked, "What is it that you can't tell Z directly? Why do you want me to tell her? Is it about the relationship between you two, father and daughter?" Nongju shook her head sadly and said, "It doesn't matter whether Z recognizes me as her father or not, because I didn't really fulfill my responsibility as a father. I'm really ashamed of her. You can tell her that her father's name is Xiaoyao, and I, Nongju, am just her teacher. What I want you to tell her is the past of her father, Xiaoyao, and her mother, Qianghua Fairy. She has the right to know this. I can't hide it from her forever." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was interesting to gossip about a handsome man and a beautiful woman. However, seeing Nongju's unprecedentedly lonely expression, he had to restrain himself so as not to irritate her again. He nodded and said, "I will try my best to live up to your trust." It was a beautiful day. We met in the green mountains and clear waters, and we fell in love at first sight. Everything seemed so beautiful, and I really fell in love with her. However, such a beautiful beginning couldn't end well, which was beyond my expectation. Nongju's handsome face was full of confusion about the past. He traveled across time and space and slowly told the story of the past that had been covered in dust. Some things are destined, and you can't avoid it even if you want to. It turned out that Nongju really fell in love with Chunghua Fairy at first sight. He didn't just play with her like other women, but really wanted to be with her forever. Therefore, he planted the crystallization of their love in Chunghua Fairy's body. Otherwise, with his cultivation, how could Chunghua Fairy get pregnant so easily? In fact, from the beginning, Nongju knew that Chunghua Fairy was a cultivator and thought she was an individual cultivator. However, with the latter's cultivation, she couldn't tell that Nongju was also a cultivator. Since Chunghua Fairy didn't mention her identity as a cultivator, Nongju didn't tell her either. At that time, Nongju was blinded by blind love. He only hoped that they could be equal and didn't want to compete with each other. Therefore, he didn't tell her that he was a master in the Huashan realm. He didn't want to scare Chunghua Fairy more or less. After going through the long life of mortals, he was used to seeing too much deception and was somewhat tired of it. He just wanted the love between them to be purer and less distracting. He thought that maybe Chunghua Fairy also thought the same, so she didn't tell him that she was a cultivator. He thought that with their relationship, it would be a great surprise when they told each other the truth. Because the love between the two of them would not be limited by their lifespans and be too short. Just think about it, how could they not be pleasantly surprised? Nongju had already thought about it. Once they knew each other's cultivator identity, he would take Chunghua Fairy back to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest and live a carefree life. After Ze was born, Nongju was overjoyed. But at this time, Chunghua Fairy suddenly told Nongju that she was a cultivator. She was a disciple of the Moon Clan. Nongju didn't care about her identity. With her cultivation, she could take away a disciple from the Moon Clan and no one would dare to stop her. But what Chunghua Fairy wanted to say was that apart from being a disciple of the Moon Clan, she was also the successor of the next leader of the Moon Clan. Chapter 574. What surprised Nongju even more was that the Moon Clan had a secret that they didn't tell outsiders. All disciples of the Moon Clan could have children outside, but if their daughters were talented enough to cultivate, they had to bring them back to the Moon Clan and cultivate under the Moon Clan. If it was a son, the Moon Clan wouldn't accept him. It was better to let the man carry on the family line. Because the Moon Clan never accepted male disciples. Chunghua Fairy felt guilty and told Nongju that she was going to bring her daughter back to the Moon Clan to cultivate. She asked Nongju to find another wife. As for her, she was going to continue the Moon Clan sooner or later. She couldn't spend the rest of her life with an ordinary person like him. One could imagine how angry Nongju was at that time. He had lived a carefree life among the flowers for half of his life, and it was not easy for him to settle down and give his heart to her. He did not expect this to be the result. She felt like she was cheated. Plus, with her cultivation and status in the cultivation world, how could she allow her daughter to cultivate in a small Moon Clan? That was the biggest joke in the world. With her cultivation of the soul formation state, she couldn't teach her daughter better than a small Moon Clan. Plus, Nongju couldn't let her daughter follow in the footsteps of her mother. Nongju didn't care about the leader of the Moon Clan. Nongju wanted to kill her way to the Moon Clan and raze the entire Moon Clan to the ground. But thinking about it, she felt that it would be too easy for Chunghua Fairy. She lied to her so badly. If a man who didn't fall in love easily found out that he was cheated after falling in love, the consequences would be terrible. Plus, he was a very powerful and capable man. Nongju was determined to let Chunghua Fairy taste the feeling of being cheated. She would regret it for the rest of her life. Chunghua Fairy knew that Nongju wouldn't be happy if she did that. However, her daughter was in her hands and Nongju couldn't take her away. She kept persuading Nongju, saying that it was for her daughter's good and that she didn't want her daughter to be like him, an ordinary person for the rest of her life. Nongju only sneered at that time. But she didn't expect that Nongju was a legendary cultivator of the soul formation state. It would be easy for her to take her daughter away from her. Therefore, on a sunset, the viburnum flower fairy had just gone out to grab something and turned around. When he came in again, he found that his daughter, who had just been placed on the bed, was gone. She immediately guessed that it was bamboo, so she looked around. However, it was impossible for her to find Nongju with her cultivation. Since then, the Jade Flower Fairy had never seen the man called Xiaoyao again. Her infant daughter also disappeared with him. Nongju naturally brought her daughter back to the purple bamboo forest and taught her carefully. From then on, the Southern Sea Purple Bamboo Forest had a female disciple called Ze. For the sake of her daughter, Nongju completely gave up the habit of flirting. Of course, Jasper Flower Fairy also played a part in it. She had broken his heart completely, and he had learned from her painful experience that he would never touch another woman again. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He opened his mouth wide and didn't know what to say. So there was such a hidden story. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. He swallowed his saliva, scratched his stiff chin, and looked at the absent-minded Nongju, speechless. At that time, he thought that Nongju, the playboy, abandoned her and played around. As a result, she got pregnant and gave birth to a baby. Then she ran away because she was unwilling to take responsibility. He never thought that the most handsome man in the world was dumped by his sister. Unbelievable. Thinking back, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly. No wonder Nongju asked him to find a chance to tell Ze about it. Thinking about Ze's strange life, how could Nongju tell her? Even if he told Ze, he would have to find a time when Ze could accept it. Damn it. Would Ze take things too hard and say that I'm talking nonsense and fight with me? What? No way. In this case, it would be more appropriate to let Ze's future husband tell her. Why did she come to me? She was trying to hurt me. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and his face twitched. Ahem. That. Senior Nongju, I think. Nongju slowly turned around and said, what do you think? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and smiled bitterly. I think that, this kind of words. I think Ze's closest person should tell her. Think about it. No one else can find a good chance for Ze to accept. Only the person closest to her can find a chance. Don't you think so? For example, the man Ze is going to marry, right? It doesn't seem appropriate for me to tell her. To be honest, I'm a little scared. Let's see then. Just keep this in mind for now. By the way, Nongju sneered and said, the man Ze is going to marry also has 3 or 4 women. I'm a little worried. I'm afraid Ze will be wronged in the future. What do you think I should do? Damn it. Why don't you just let Ze marry me? Don't let the goodies flow to others. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. But thinking about it, maybe in Nongju's eyes, his future son-in-law was one of his own, and he, Yu Qianqiu, was an outsider. Thinking about it, he was a little angry. He immediately patted his chest and said, that's easy. As long as you say it, I'll find a way to do it for you. It's just 3 or 4 women. If you want to kill me, just say it. I promise you'll do it without anyone knowing. Your son-in-law will never suspect you. She wanted him to stay by Ze's side and live an honest life. If he dares to marry me in the future, as long as I know it, I promise I'll make Ze unique. If he keeps doing it, I don't mind making him a eunuch. The corner of Nongju's mouth twitched. She smacked her lips and said, I believe you. You're the best at doing this kind of thing. It won't be a problem for you. Her words made Yu Qianqiu a little unhappy. What did she mean by, I'm the best at doing this kind of thing? He curled his lips and said, Senior Nongju, I never do this kind of thing. Only when you say it, I'll do my best. This is called keeping promises and valuing credibility. Forget it. It's fine as long as you have the heart. Nongju waved her hand and asked, if I want to marry my daughter to him, should he give me a betrothal gift first? How much do you think I should accept to marry my daughter to him? Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, you're kidding. Mr. Nongju is famous in the cultivation world. Your daughter is even more precious than him. How can the betrothal gift not be enough? By the way, is your future son-in-law rich? Nongju thought for a while and said slowly, rich. There are many treasures. Any one of them is a rare treasure. But that guy is a miser. I'm afraid it's a little difficult for him to take out a big gift. Any one of them is a rare treasure? Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up and he swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He couldn't stop clicking his tongue in his heart. I knew it. The son-in-law that Nongju likes must be from a powerful family. I don't know who he is. If I want to build a relationship with him in the future, even if he's a miser, I'll pluck some of his feathers. F***ck. Yu Qianzhou said indignantly, the richer a man is, the more stingy he is. He doesn't even want to give a big gift to his wife. It's reasonable for a poor man like me. Why won't he give a big gift even if he has money? How can you swallow this? Tell me who the bastard is. I'll avenge you sooner or later. He had already begun to plan in his heart. After torturing the World Chamber of Commerce, his next stop would be Nongju's rich son-in-law. Speaking of him, I'm full of anger. I don't want to talk about him. By the way, what about you? Nongju asked. What about me? Yu Qianzhou didn't know why he asked this. Nongju said with a fake smile, I'm marrying my daughter. Aren't you going to give her a gift? F***ck. You don't have the ability to get your son-in-law's betrothal gift. Why do you want me to give a gift? Is there anyone who asks for a gift from a guest before they even get married? I'm so easy to bully. Yu Qianzhou curled his lips and said with a smile, that one came in a hurry. He didn't bring anything good with him. How about this? On the day of Ziyi's marriage, I'll definitely bring a gift to congratulate her. No, you have to receive the gift before you get married. Nongju said seriously. Receive a gift in advance? Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and said suspiciously, how come I didn't know there was such a rule in the cultivation world? This is the rule of my southern sea purple bamboo forest. Nongju's face stiffened. Then, he thought of a suitable reason and explained, furthermore, you're very busy. When the time comes, you won't even know where I'm going to inform you. While I'm here, it's good to receive the gift in advance. Don't tell me that you're so stingy that you won't even give a gift when Ziyi gets married. Hee hee. What are you saying? Am I that stingy? I'm just thinking about what I should give her. Yu Qianzhou said perfunctorily. However, after thinking about the close relationship between him and Ziyi, it would be a little inappropriate to give an ordinary gift. Subconsciously, he touched the storage bag on his waist and found that it was gone. Only then did he remember that it was taken away by Nongju and was lying on the ground. Nongju had already checked it. If he took something out from it, it would be a little inappropriate. So, he smiled at Nongju and put one hand into the clothes on his chest. He pulled out another storage bag from under his armpit. Nongju's eyes twitched. She thought to herself, there's another storage bag on her body. Yu Qianzhou reached into his storage pouch and pulled out a sword with simple and unadorned patterns. He held it in his hand and examined it. But then, his regretful expression turned resolute. He said straightforwardly, this sword is the same style as the one I gave to my master. They're both treasures of that immortal. Since Ziyi is getting married, I have nothing to say. I'll congratulate her with a generous gift. Senior Nongju, you won't say that I'm stingy, will you? As he said this, he held the sword with both hands and handed it over. I sincerely wish Ziyi a happy life. Nongju's eyes lit up. She took it and touched it. As expected, it was not inferior to the one she gave to Bai Changchun. She couldn't help but praise, good sword. Then, she nodded with satisfaction and said, you still have a conscience. Chapter 575. Hee hee. The gift is too small. As long as you are satisfied. Yu Qianzhou laughed happily. He didn't realize that he had sold himself. Nongju sheathed her sword and inexplicably felt relieved. It was as if the courage that had been on her shoulders had finally been removed. She looked at Yu Qianqiu again and thought of the day when Ze bullied him on Shantian Island. She suddenly felt refreshed. Can't catch you? Someone can. You will suffer in the future. Yu Qianqiu suddenly found a strange smile on Nongzhu's lips. His heart skipped a beat and he immediately became alert. Is she using Ziyi's marriage as an excuse to cheat me of my treasure? That's too shameless. So he asked suspiciously, what are you laughing at? Are you using Ziyi to cheat me of my treasure? Cheat your head. Will I cheat you with Ziyi's life? Nongzhu scolded. She felt angry and funny looking at this guy. No matter how cunning he was, he would still have a blind spot when thinking about problems. This guy's EQ was extremely low. As for his low EQ, Yu Qianqiu had actually discovered it himself. Since his previous life, he had been living in deception and killing. He didn't have the mood to play romantic and delicate love. Saving his life was the first priority. Although he had met many women and it was common for him to play around with them, he could tell whether a woman was good or bad at a glance. However, he had no experience in serious love. Later, he made a name for himself and had a position in Jianghu. In addition, the women he met at that time were quite realistic. Therefore, for him, no matter how beautiful a woman was, she was still an animal on the bed. Talking about love with them? He was either talking nonsense or courting death. Because he had no experience in this aspect, and this life was the fate of his previous life, he was still fighting and killing. Therefore, the women he found in this life were as simple and kind as possible. Because he felt that it was too tiring to play mind games with his woman, and he didn't have the energy to deal with it. He had chosen Furong, Wu Lixue, Chu Ping'er, and Bai Suzhen, who had been silently sacrificing herself for him. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had thought it through. Among the 3 women who had a romantic relationship, only Chu Ping'er had a complicated life experience. However, it was a dream that led him to join the cultivation world, and he instinctively wanted to protect this dream. As for Furong and Wu Lixue, they were 2 simple and pure women. So what if he said they were stupid? In short, he liked them very much. Wasn't Bai Suzhen the same? She was a woman who only knew how to treat him well. It was also because of these women who did not hold him back that he could do whatever he wanted in the cultivation world without any worries. In fact, the reason why he didn't bring the women together was because he was worried that they would clash and cause trouble for him, and he didn't have time to deal with them. After all, women were also human beings. Who would be willing to share the same man with others? In such a contradictory situation, he could only take one step at a time. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame himself for being a bit fickle. Every time he thought about it, he would tell himself that it didn't matter if he had a low EQ. He would try his best to treat them well. Definitely. Of course, a low EQ didn't mean that he was an idiot. For a woman like the enchantress who dared to love and hate openly, how could he not know her feelings? However, some things were difficult for him to accept. It was really difficult, and it was better for him to avoid it. Hee. I was just saying. I didn't mean anything else. Don't be angry. Hearing Nongzhu's scolding, he agreed with a silly smile. It was true. Nongzhu would not cheat others with Ziyi's life. Otherwise, she would not be Nongzhu. It seemed that Ziyi was really going to get married. What a pity. Although she was sometimes unruly, she was still a simple girl. But she was going to be someone else's woman. Damn it. I'm going back to Shantian Island in a few days. Do you have any words for me to take back? Nongzhu looked at him with an evil smile. Aren't you very capable? When you become my son-in-law, I will torture you. Let's see if you still have any temper then. Now he had thought it through. Since his daughter liked him, could he really be cruel and stop her by force? The answer was definitely no. Taking 10,000 steps back and thinking about it, this guy wasn't completely useless. Although he was a little bad, in this sinister cultivation world, he had the ability to protect himself. This was not necessarily a bad thing for Ze, who was inexperienced in the world. Moreover, Lao Bai had an extraordinary vision. He thought so highly of him and hinted many times that he could let Ze be with him without worry. There must be a reason. Then let nature take its course. In fact, what moved Nongju the most was Yu Qianzhou's care for Furong. He had always wanted to find a man for his daughter. He was the type who could take good care of his daughter. But who told him to act too late, and another woman had already beat him to it? But who could see that this bad guy had such a disgusting side? Could he blame himself for making a mistake? Yu Qianzhou scratched his head embarrassedly. He smiled and said, "That. Senior, please help me tell Furong to stay in Shantian Island. I'm fine outside. And my master, please send my regards to him." Haha. That's all? Nongju reminded, "Don't you have any words for Ze?" She sounded a little unhappy. Yes. Yu Qianzhou quickly nodded and said, "Help me congratulate Ze. On the day she gets married, I will definitely prepare a big gift for her." That's more like it. Nongju suddenly sighed. Remember to treat Ze well in the future. I don't need you to remind me. Based on our relationship, I will definitely treat her well. Yu Qianzhou patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry. Ze's business is my business. Tell her, no matter who she marries, if she encounters any trouble in the future, just let me know. I don't dare to promise anything else, but murder and arson." No, I mean I won't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire." Idiot. Nongju scolded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She pointed at him and said, "I heard that you, Yu Qianzhou, are very talented. I really wonder if you plagiarized those things from somewhere. They don't match up at all." Yu Qianzhou didn't care. They were plagiarized things anyway. Nongju asked again, "Tell me honestly. You became Miao Yud and created that restriction-breaking pill. What are you trying to do?" "Hey. You know I have a lot of women and expenses. If I don't make some money, how can I support my family?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head helplessly. Nongju's mouth twitched. Listening to him, it seemed that her daughter would not be short of money in the future. This was a good thing. She paused and said, "You have your eyes on the world commerce? Isn't it said that the world commerce is the richest?" Yu Qianzhou said weakly. Humph. Be careful. In Baikang's money isn't that easy to get. Don't let your women become widows before you can get your money. Nongju's words were sarcastic, but there was a rare sense of concern. The difference in treatment between a family and a non-family was huge. Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, "Whether or not he can get the money is another matter. But if he wants to kill me, I'm afraid that In Baikang is still lacking." Nongju glanced at him. She still had some confidence in his ability to escape. It was definitely not a coincidence that this guy could escape from death time and time again. He must have something to rely on. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't dare to touch In Baikang. How audacious. Do as you see fit. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Nongju was about to turn around when she heard Yu Qianzhou ask, "Senior Nongju, let me ask you something. Do you know who the one-armed guy in the ghost manor is? Also, I saw a mysterious masked woman in the ghost manor. The one-armed old man was very respectful to her." Nongju asked casually, "You met both of them in the ghost manor?" "Yes." Yu Qianzhou nodded and said, "I feel that the one-armed old man is a spirit-severing master. But he was very respectful to the masked woman. Could it be that she is also a spirit-severing master?" "Yes, both of them are spirit-severing masters. Moreover, both of them are people with great backgrounds. Speaking of which, they are related to your master." Nongju explained, "The one-armed old man is called Li Duxing." Chapter 576. Yu Qianzhou asked in surprise, "He's already injured like that, but Lu Yanqing still saved him?" Nongju shook her head and said, "I don't know. I didn't know that Li Duxing was still alive until I heard that he appeared in Ghost Village. He should have been saved by Lu Yanqing. With an injury like that, I reckon that other than Lu Yanqing's wonderful hands, no one else would be able to save him. But I heard that his cultivation dropped from the last stage of Huashan realm to the early stage of Huashan realm. I don't know if his cultivation has improved after all these years. Tut tut. In this case, that one-armed old fart owes you a life-saving grace. Yu Qianqiu said with a chuckle. He was still in a coma and didn't know that I saved him. What's more, I didn't contact him and I don't want him to owe me anything. When I handed him over to Lu Yanqing, I told Lu Yanqing not to tell him that I saved him. I think Li Duxing doesn't know about it. Nongzhu said lightly. Oh. Yu Qianqiu made a long "oh" sound, which seemed to say, I didn't know that you are so noble and unquestionable. You did a good deed without leaving your name. Nongzhu ignored his sarcastic tone and reminded him, so many years have passed. I don't know what Li Duxing thinks about what happened that year. Be careful when you meet him in the future. Don't let him know that you are Bai's disciple. If he still holds a grudge against you, I'm afraid he will hurt you. I see. Yu Qianqiu nodded. Suddenly, he frowned and seemed to think of something. He asked seriously, what's the relationship between you and Wen Lanfeng? Hearing this, Nongzhu looked at him seriously and warned, don't you dare have any bad ideas about Wen Lanfeng. This time, he didn't hesitate to fall out with the 6 masters and use them to show his power. It's all because he promised me and your master that he would support you in Shantian Island. Don't be so ungrateful. Needless to say, I'm not a person who returns kindness with ingratitude. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said in a low voice, but he lost to master, I don't know if he will have other thoughts. Other than being infatuated with Lu Yanqing, he is an upright person, and his relationship with me is not bad. Since you promised me to take care of you, you won't play tricks behind my back. You're trustworthy. Nongzhu asked suspiciously, what are you trying to say? It's like this. Yu Qianqiu asked, when you came up just now, did you see the young man beside Manhu? You mean the boy at the early stage of nature's test? Nongzhu asked. That's right. That person is the trader of the Chinese cultivation world, Yan Zhuixing, one of the Yan father and son who retreated to the everlasting island. I didn't expect him to come here. It's really suspicious. Yu Qianqiu said with a frown. Oh. So it was him. Nongzhu joked, I heard that you and he were sworn enemies in the Chinese cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu ignored his sarcasm. A fierce light flashed in his eyes. He squinted slightly, stared at Nongzhu, and said slowly, help me kill him. You want me to kill Yan Zhuixing? Nongzhu stared at him up and down in surprise for a while, and then said with a smile, no. Don't you claim to be the best master below the Huashan realm? You've killed several masters at the late stage of nature's test. Yan Zhuixing is just at the early stage of nature's test. It's easy for you to kill him. What's more, I heard that Yan Zhuixing was defeated by you when he was in the Chinese cultivation world. He should be no match for you. Why do you want me to help you kill him? It should be a kind of intuition. I don't know why, but I always feel that he will be a great disaster if he stays, and we must eradicate him as soon as possible. By the way, I remember something. Yu Qianqiu asked, do you remember that Z and I once held a sword drawing contest in the Chinese cultivation world? I've heard a little about it. Nongzhu nodded slightly, and carefully observed the expression on Yu Qianqiu's face. She found that his expression was very serious when he talked about Yan Zhuixing. This made him take it seriously. He thought to himself that this guy was not afraid of anything and even dared to kill masters at the Huashan realm, but he was afraid of a cultivator at the early stage of nature's test. It was really puzzling. You also know that the 2 swords were condensed by the ghost fire of the netherworld. During the sword drawing contest, one of Manhu's junior brothers was killed by the black fire. But do you know how evil Yan Zhuixing is? Yu Qianqiu still had some lingering fear when he thought of the scene at that time. Yan Zhuixing's extremely cold eyes, after a pause, he continued, that guy is not afraid of the black fire, and he even inhaled the evil spirit released by the black fire as oxygen. And that pair of eyes, oh my God, are those still human eyes? Damn, they are so evil. Z also saw it at that time. You can ask her if you don't believe me. There is such a thing. Nongju was also shocked. Others did not know the power of the black fire, but she had personally entered the 9th Netherworld cave and the Sea of Netherworld. Even though she was at the middle stage of Huashan realm, she did not dare to stay in front of the Sea of Netherworld for too long. She naturally knew how powerful the black spirit released by the black fire was, especially the black wind blade condensed by the black spirit, which was one of the biggest obstacles to the 9th Netherworld cave. But Yan Juexing was only at the early stage of nature's test. He was not afraid of the ghost fire of the Netherworld, and he could even absorb the black spirit. Even Bai Changchun was afraid of it, but he was not afraid of it. It would be strange if Nongju was not shocked. Yu Qianqiu snorted fiercely, I don't care how evil he is. It is better to eliminate the root of the problem than to nip it in the bud. With my cultivation, I can't find a chance to do it now, otherwise I would have done it long ago. So, please help me get rid of him as soon as possible. A ruthless character was revealed without a doubt. Nongju was stunned by his look. She thought, Old Bai is cruel and merciless, but this guy is not only cruel and merciless, but also fierce and unscrupulous. Where did he learn all these? I can't help you with this. Nongju shook her head slowly and said, Yan Juexing is one of the main figures in the war against the Huaxia cultivation world with the support of various countries. I promised them that I would not interfere in the war between them and the Huaxia cultivation world. Once I help you kill Yan Juexing, I will break the promise I made. Yu Qianqiu stamped his feet in exasperation and said, Hey! Why are you so pedantic? I didn't ask you to do it openly. You could have killed him secretly. With your cultivation, killing him would be a piece of cake. If you did it secretly, no one would know it was you. Go to hell as far as you can. Nongju was a little embarrassed and said, Do you think I am like you? I do things by hook or by crook. I will definitely keep my promise to others. This is my bottom line as a person. Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. Then he bowed and tried to persuade her with good intentions. Let's not talk about the hatred between me and him. He will seek revenge on me sooner or later. But I really have a very strong feeling that you may not believe it if I say it. When I saw him in the saber drawing contest, I had a very strong premonition that this guy will become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world sooner or later. Just think of it as getting rid of the scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world. He had a premonition that Yan Juexing would become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world, and Yan Juexing had a premonition that he would meet him in by one country. I don't know whether these two guys are telling the truth or not. Anyway, it is a little mysterious. Nongju snorted and smiled, this guy is fooling me again. He obviously wants to use me to get rid of the dissidents, but he uses a premonition as an excuse. If he wants to fool me, he should find a better reason. I think you will become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world sooner or later. No, you are already a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world. Wherever you go, there will be chaos and no peace. Even if what you said is true, I will not break my bottom line. Nongju shook her head unmoved. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help swearing. But he was still not reconciled. He rolled his eyes and said, Wait, since you have a good relationship with Wen Lanfeng, there is something I have to remind you. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Nongju said impatiently. Did you notice when you passed by just now? Don't you find it strange that Yan Juexing is actually hanging out with that hipster girl? Yu Qianqiu reminded him with good intentions. Nongju looked at him vigilantly, but after thinking for a while, she also felt something was wrong. Although Hipster was a member of the royal family, she was immortal and had nothing to do with cultivators. At most, she knew a little martial arts. But Yan Juexing, Man Hu, and the other 4 masters at the end of the nature's test were together with her. Could they be friends? seeing that he was thinking, Yu Qianqiu did not forget to add fuel to the fire. You may not know Yan Juexing, but he and I are enemies. I know him very well. As the saying goes, the person who knows you best is your enemy. We have a deep understanding of each other. Seeing that Nongzhu was listening carefully, he continued, Yan Juexing is extremely vicious. When he was still in the 100 Flowers Valley of Huaxia, he controlled a group of people with poison. The most terrifying thing was that he had somehow found the long-lost, primordial soul-stripping technique, and had been secretly controlling the cultivators of the cultivation world for his own use. Later, he used those people to burn, kill, and loot. Unfortunately, I ran into him, and it was because I exposed him that we became enemies. If you don't believe me, you can ask around in the Huaxia cultivation world. Then you will know whether what I said is true or not. Are you saying that he is plotting against the hipster girls? Nongzhu asked casually while thinking. Hipster is nothing. So what if he is a member of the royal family? Even if you give that girl to him, I'm afraid he will be too lazy to take her with him. She is a burden. He even brought 4 masters at the end of the nature's test to go shopping with that girl. What a ghost. Do you believe that he is so kind? Yu Qianqiu sneered, and then said very seriously, I suspect that guy has designs on the Wen family. Otherwise, he will not be interested in a hipster. Since you have a good relationship with Wen Lanfeng, you should let him be on his guard. You don't want me to find Wen Lanfeng and ask him to kill Yan Juexing, do you? Nongzhu suddenly came to her senses. She realized that this guy had already planned to kill Yan Juexing when he mentioned Wen Lanfeng. But he encouraged her to do it. Seeing that she did not agree, he showed his true colors. It was really one trap after another. Chapter 577. At this point, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to hide it anymore. It was meaningless. He said, let's not beat around the bush. Since you don't want to do it, let Wen Lanfeng do it. It's for the good of the Wen family. Impossible. Wen Lanfeng can't kill an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator for no reason. He's not like Yin Baikong. If he were that kind of person, I wouldn't be friends with him. Nongzhu saw that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to give up, so she waved her hand and said, all right. Don't try to persuade me anymore. You figure it out yourself. He's just an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator. It's not worth it for a soul formation cultivator to do it. Don't you know some early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators? You'd better target them. Although I haven't seen Yan Juexing fight, I'm afraid even an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator is no match for him. Yu Qianqiu asked, do you believe me? It doesn't matter if I believe you or not. You figure it out yourself. I'll go back and tell Wen Lanfeng about the hipster. Nongzhu lifted her hand and removed the soundproof barrier. She opened the door and walked out slowly with her hands behind her back. Pedantic. I'll do it myself. Yu Qianqiu muttered and followed behind Nongzhu. When the door opened, everyone's eyes were fixed on the upstairs. They saw 2 people walk out one after another and walk down the stairs. The most eye-catching one was Niu Yud, who walked behind them. He was not an ordinary person. How many people dared to be as arrogant as him in the cultivation world? Even Yan Juexing's gaze towards him was filled with admiration. The hipster was afraid. This person was comparable to Mr. Nongzhu. As for the shopkeepers and workers in the shop, they were trembling with fear. Imagine what kind of person would dare to look down on the princess. Mr. Nongzhu, Senior Niu. A group of people saluted. The 2 of them nodded slightly in acknowledgement, both of them looking like experts. Nongzhu took the opportunity to take a serious look at Yan Juexing, and then glanced at hipster. Without saying anything, she walked out of the store and said to Wen Chongjing, who was bowing at the door, let these people go back. Let's go. Wen Chongjing hurriedly shouted at the leaders of the soldiers outside, and then chased after Nongzhu eagerly. As for the soldiers, they had no choice but to withdraw. Yu Qianqiu glanced at everyone expressionlessly. His eyes paused on Yan Juexing as he let out a sound of surprise. Yan Juixing and Man Who exchanged glances with each other. They did not know what Niu Yud had seen. Yulan smiled and said, Senior Niu, is there something wrong? What's your name? Yu Qianqiu asked Yan Juixing. With a faint smile, Yan Juixing bowed politely and said, I'm Yan Juixing. What can I do for you, senior? Yu Qianqiu looked at Hipster and the shopkeepers in the shop and said, Yulan do, ask the irrelevant people to leave. Everyone understood the meaning behind his words. Some topics related to cultivators were naturally inconvenient for mortals to know. Yulan Du took the order and immediately asked the shopkeeper and the waiters to leave. The shopkeeper and the waiters did not dare to object, so they all left obediently. Under Yulan Du's instructions, the waiters even carried the 4 unconscious guards out. Only when Hipster was invited, she looked at Yan Juixing reluctantly, as if asking for his opinion. Yan Juixing smiled and nodded to her. Hipster then pouted and went out. Yulan Du was very meticulous. He even released his divine sense to check every corner of the restaurant. After making sure there was no one, he cupped his hands and said, Senior, it's done. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand to indicate that he understood. He stared at Yan Juixing and sized him up. Sometimes he shook his head and sometimes he sighed. The group of people were baffled by the commotion. After a while, Senior Niu asked, You are Yan Juixing, right? Yes. Yan Juixing looked calm on the surface, but he was pondering in his heart. Strange. I've seen countless people, but I've never seen someone like you. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and asked, Do you cultivate some kind of strange cultivation method? Not bad. Man Hu and the others were shocked. They did not expect Niu Yud to be so powerful. He could actually see that Yan Juixing cultivated a special cultivation method. He was indeed an expert who dared to attack the forces of various countries. Even their master, Bing Qingzi, could not be compared to him. He was too powerful. Yan Juixing's calm eyes were also moved. The few of them were not inexperienced people, so they quickly concealed it. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du could see that something was wrong with such an obvious reaction. The two of them exchanged glances. Senior, you are overpraising me. The cultivation method that Junior cultivates is not special. It is a cultivation method passed down by the 10,000 demons in the Chinese cultivation world. Yan Juixing explained. Passed down my ass. Isn't Xiao Weiyuan a disciple of the 10,000 demons? Isn't he better than you in the sword drawing competition? Yu Qianqiu also saw some clues from their brief shock. He knew that he had guessed correctly. He glanced at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du from the corner of his eyes. He stared at Yan Juixing and shook his head. Brat, you might be able to hide it from others, but you can't hide it from my eyes. Although I don't know what cultivation method you are cultivating, if the 10,000 demons had such a cultivation method, I'm afraid that the entire cultivation world would have already surrendered to the 10,000 demons. The top 10 experts of the cultivation world would all have to step aside. These words were too frightening to hear. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du stared at Yan Juixing with eagle-like eyes. What a joke. This brat actually possessed a peerless cultivation method that even the top 10 experts of the cultivation world would have to step aside. How could that be? Didn't Niu Yud say that this was a cultivation method that could make the entire cultivation world surrender? Man Hu and the others were shocked again. This Niu Yud was too powerful. Everything he said was true. The demonic book was indeed a heaven-defying cultivation method. They felt that they shouldn't have stayed in Lan City this time. They shouldn't have met Niu Yud. This time, they were in big trouble. Once this news spread, the consequences could be imagined. The 4 of them were tense on the inside but relaxed on the outside. Their eyes were faintly staring at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du. If this terrifying Niu Yud was not here, the 4 of them would have killed them on the spot. They would never allow the 2 of them to spread the secret. Senior, your joke is too big. If this spreads, I won't be able to bear it. Yan Juixing said with a smile on his face. In his heart, he wished that he could kill this person. But for now, he wouldn't dare even if he had 10 guts. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. At least until now, he had never seen such a powerful person like Niu Yud. When he met Wen Lanfeng in the Wen family's sacred land, even Wen Lanfeng couldn't see through it. Yet, he could. His cultivation could be imagined. No wonder he had the guts to mess around in the cultivation world. Without some ability, who would dare? Hee. Don't be nervous. I'm just saying casually. As for whether it's true or not, you and I both know it. There's no need to fight over it. Yu Qianzhou shrugged indifferently and said, whether you make the entire cultivation world submit or not has nothing to do with me. Anyway, I'm alone. I won't fight for fame or profit with anyone. Haha. I'll just watch the show. Senior really likes to joke. Man who stepped forward and cupped his hands. We still have something to do. Farewell, Senior. The few of them bowed to Yu Qianzhou together. They all knew that it was not good to stay here for long. Go ahead. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand with an indifferent look. The few of them quickly left without saying anything. Yu Qianzhou was still smiling. Guan Zhongkai couldn't help but ask with cupped hands. Senior, what you said just now is true. What's true can't be false, and what's false can't be true. We'll naturally know in the future. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. That kid will sooner or later. TSK. Let's not talk about it. Yu Qianzhou suddenly frowned and said strangely, from the looks of these 4 experts at the end of the crossing calamity stage, it seems that Yan Zhuixing is very important to them. Their words and actions all revolve around him. Could it be that they already knew? Being reminded by him, the 2 of them were shocked. They suddenly remembered something that was known by all the forces. Everyone had been wondering why Bing Qingzi's side valued the Yan father and son so much. Especially towards Yan Zhuixing, the few disciples of Bing Qingzi almost never left his side. Guan Zhongkai revealed an expression of sudden realization. He cupped his hands and said impatiently, Senior, I have something to do. I'll leave for a while. I'll be back soon. Yu Lan did the same. The 2 of them seemed to be afraid that Yu Qianzhou wouldn't agree. Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and sighed. I know what you want to do. Is there a need to do this? Why worry about it? Even if the sky falls, there will be someone taller to hold it up. Don't blame me for not reminding you. I just exposed Yan Zhuixing's background. Although they can't do anything to me, they won't be afraid of you. If you are by my side, they definitely won't dare to touch you. But once you leave me, they might kill you to silence you. Of course, if you have to go back to report, I suggest that you 2 stay together. It's safer to stay together. Yu Qianzhou was naturally afraid that something would happen to the 2 of them. If the 2 witnesses died and the words came out of Niu Yud's mouth, even if it was true, no one would believe it. That was why he didn't forget to remind them so that their efforts wouldn't go to waste. Thank you for the reminder, Senior. The 2 of them bowed and thanked him. They looked at each other and nodded. Then, they rushed out of the back door of the restaurant. Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing. You haven't tasted the feeling of being hunted, right? I've already had my fill. You and I are enemies. How can we favor one and discriminate against the other? I'll let you have some fun too. Otherwise, I'll be sorry. I'll also watch the show. Yu Qianzhou muttered and revealed a wretched smile. He slowly walked to the door and took out a large ingot of gold. He threw it to the smiling shopkeeper and waved his hand. Continue your business. I won't disturb you anymore. Chapter 578. But the shopkeeper was in a hurry to flatter Yu Qianzhou and refused to take money. What a joke. He was flattering a person who was more important than the princess. How could he accept money? If he could form a relationship with such a person, it would be more valuable than this ingot of gold. Yu Qianzhou glared at him coldly. The shopkeeper suddenly felt a chill and shivered in fear. He didn't dare to pester him anymore and watched the distinguished guest disappear into the street. Walking to a secluded alley and seeing no one around, Yu Qianqiu flashed into the air. After identifying the direction, he flew to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce. The reason why he came to Lan City of Bai One country was to find a chance to see Wen Lanfeng and see what this guy who supported him meant. He didn't want to be sold out without knowing. He didn't expect to meet Nongzhu in advance. He was relieved to know that Wen Lanfeng didn't have any bad intentions. The problem he had to solve now was Yan Zhuixing. Since he met him, he had to take the opportunity to eliminate this guy to avoid future trouble. If he was Yan Zhuixing, he would definitely kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to silence them. After all, the odds of winning against 2 with 4 in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage was very high. Plus there was a strange guy like Yan Zhuixing, so the other party would definitely ambush on the way to the Lan City branch. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. If Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were in danger, he would definitely think of a way to save them and let them spread the news, just as he expected. In a wilderness on the outskirts of Lan City, Man Hu and the others were discussing how to split into 2 groups to intercept and kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. But what made them depressed was that everyone thought that Guan Zhongkai would go to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce to report, but what about Yulan? Where was the contact point of the Circe's kingdom? Where could they intercept and kill Yulan? There were only a few of them. They couldn't just scatter and search everywhere, right? As for Wen Qing, who had the mind to care about her now? They had already dumped her. Damn it. Why did we miss this? What's the point of just killing Guan Zhongkai? The rest of Yulan can still spread the news. The 7th brother stomped his feet in frustration. 5th brother looked at Man Hu and said, "Eldest brother, what do you think we should do?" Man Hu snorted coldly and said, "The Redbud Kingdom isn't far from the snowy mountains." Now that things had come to this, he had no choice but to contact his master and ask him to personally take action. He asked the old man to immediately rush to the Purple Thistle Kingdom and kill Shangguan Taiping and the others before they spread the news. He believed that with his master's cultivation, killing Shangguan Taiping would not be a problem. In this way, even if they get the news, dead people won't reveal secrets. Lao Wu clapped his hands and agreed, "That's right. Let's kill Shangguan Taiping and his men. I'm sure Yulandu won't know about it for a while, so he won't spread the news. We'll definitely be able to find him easily." It's settled then. 5th brother, 6th brother, go find Yulandu immediately. I'll send a message to Master first, and then I'll go to the Orchid City branch with 7th brother. The World Commerce doesn't have any experts here, and Guan Zhongkai isn't my match. The 2 of us are enough to wipe out the Orchid City branch. Man Hu waved his hand and said, "Let's split up." Just as Lao Wu and Lao Lu were about to leave, they heard Yan Zhuixing, who had been frowning and pondering, shout, "Wait." The 4 martial brothers all paused, and Man Hu asked doubtfully, "Young palace master, this matter shouldn't be delayed. What else do you have to say?" Yan Zhuixing shook his head and sighed. "Do you really think that Niu Yu just casually mentioned it and will really stay out of it? That's impossible. If I'm not mistaken, he purposely said those words for Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to hear. If he really wants to stay out of it, it's fine as long as he knows it. Why must he say it out loud? Maybe he really spilled the beans? This kind of thing isn't impossible." Lao Qi casually said. Man Hu raised his hand to signal him to shut up, frowned and said in a deep voice, "Young palace master is right. Niu Yud's last words are indeed fanning the flames." "Young palace master, what do you mean?" "I have a feeling that Niu Yud is purposely targeting me." Yan Zhuixing's eyes stared coldly in the direction of Lan City, gritted his teeth and said, "Since he deliberately wants Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to spread the news, how can he let us kill the 2 of them so easily? If I'm not wrong, he will definitely obstruct us. With his cultivation, which one of us can stop him? Furthermore, if we make a move, it will make it even more obvious that we have ulterior motives, and it will prove that we want to silence them. At that time, we won't even have a chance to redeem ourselves. With all the countries fighting together, How can Senior Bing withstand the joint attack of a few experts? What a vicious plan. What is this Niu Yu trying to do? We have no enmity with him. Lao Wu let out a breath of cold air. Lao Chi weakly asked, do you guys think that Master has some enmity with him? What's the point of saying this now? Man Hu glared at him, then turned back and said, young Palace Master, do you have an idea? It can't be considered an idea. We can only try it as a last resort. At least there's a chance to recover our losses. Yan Juixing quickly analyzed to the others, the only thing we need to do now is to immediately send a message to Senior Bing, so that he can be prepared. We have to return to Snowy Mountain as soon as possible before the news spreads. Otherwise, it won't be safe to stay anywhere. Once we have a foothold, we can accuse Niu Yu of spouting nonsense. After all, Niu Yu is a big liar, and everyone in the cultivation world knows that. In terms of credibility, we are better than him. In the end, it will depend on whose words are more trustworthy. This is our only chance. The others nodded slightly. Man Hu clapped his hands and said, all right, it's decided. You guys bring young Palace Master and hurry on with the journey. After I send the message to Master, I will immediately rush over. There's no time to lose, let's go. In the blink of an eye, the four of them quickly flew into the sky. Man Hu was alone in the wilderness. He took out a handful of spirit stones, found the direction of Snowy Mountain, and used his unique voice transmission secret technique to send a message. Yu Qianqiu flew along the route from Lan City to the World Commerce Association's branch. Along the way, he didn't even see any signs of fighting, let alone hear any sounds of fighting. The Lan City branch was just ahead, so why wasn't there any reaction? Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, pinched his chin, and muttered to himself, strange, could it be that I made a mistake in my judgment? Or could Yan Juixing and the others bear the consequences of this news spreading? It can't be that awesome, right? Logically speaking, the World Commerce Association is the most powerful and has the widest channels to spread the news. The first person they would kill should be Guan Zhongkai. Just as he was about to go to the Lan City branch to see if Guan Zhongkai was there, he heard someone shouting, Senior Niu, why are you here? Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and saw Guan Zhongkai and Yulan coming together, followed by more than 10 people. The group of people gathered in the air and bowed to him, Senior Niu. No need to stand on ceremony. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, suppressing the doubts in his heart, and asked Guan Zhongkai, you've already sent the news back to the World Commerce Association's headquarters? Guan Zhongkai rubbed his palms excitedly and said, that's right, my master personally received the news. At the same time, my master also told this junior to thank Senior, saying that if it wasn't for Senior, we wouldn't have discovered such a major hidden danger. He was so excited because Sikong Ju praised him for doing well this time, saying that he would personally tell Grandmaster Yin Baikong. As for his previous mistakes, he wouldn't pursue it anymore, and his authority in the World Commerce Association was restored. What a joke, this authority wasn't simple. In terms of seniority, he was the number 4 person in the World Commerce Association. He was second only to his martial uncle Jing Yuankong. How could he not be happy? As a matter of fact, as soon as he regained his authority to mobilize manpower, he immediately mobilized the 15 experts of the branch here. Half of it was for Yulan to see, to tell him that he hadn't lost power in the World Commerce Association. The other half was to ensure Yulan's safety when he went to deliver the news. After all, he was also worried that Man Hu and the others would silence them. If an accident happened, with these people blocking, it would be enough for the 2 of them to escape. Haha. Don't thank me, this matter has nothing to do with me. You guys go do what you need to do. Yu Qianqiu politely and humbly brushed these people off. Watching the group of people disappear into the distance, he still had a stomach full of doubts and felt that something was wrong. After that, he arrived at the Lan City branch. The manager here also recognized him and immediately received him warmly. Yu Qianqiu let the manager do what he needed to and didn't need to care about him. Sitting in the inner hall and waiting for Guan Zhongkai to return, he frowned and thought about what went wrong. It shouldn't be like this. World Commerce Association Headquarters, Cornucopia God of Wealth Peak. After Sikongju received the news from his disciple, he immediately went to the Hall of Wealth at the top of the God of Wealth Peak and quickly informed the seated Yin Baikong of the news. What? There's such a thing? Yin Baikong opened his eyes and stood up. He stared at his eldest disciple and shouted, "Are you sure that this news is true? It shouldn't be false." Zhong Kai saw it with his own eyes and heard it with his own ears. Sikongju explained, according to Zhong Kai, Nyoyud seems to know Nongju. After sending Nongju out of the restaurant, he accidentally saw Yan Juexing and asked him a few questions on the spot. Although Nyoyud didn't take it seriously after asking, Zhong Kai saw that Yan Juexing and the others became nervous and quickly left. Zhong Kai felt that this was a serious matter and immediately returned to the Lan City branch to report this matter to me. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes and said, "You mean that Bing Qingzi's disciples know this secret?" This is only Zhong Kai's judgment based on the situation on the spot. This is because he noticed that when Nyoyud mentioned this matter, the expressions of Bing Qingzi's 4 disciples were obviously not right. Furthermore, it was Man Hu, the eldest disciple of Bing Qingzi, who first found an excuse to bring Yan Juexing away. Sikongju was speaking the truth. However, he didn't know that Guan Zhongkai had exaggerated the matter a lot in order to atone for his crimes. He even showed off his wisdom and martial prowess. Humph. Bing Qingzi, what the hell are you trying to do? Yin Baikong's expression turned sinister as he said in a deep voice, "When everyone decided to replace the Yan father and son, Bing Qingzi even came to persuade me and Hu Changshou to protect them. At that time, I felt that it was strange. They were just 2 insignificant people and I couldn't figure it out. I almost forgot about it. Who would have thought that there was such a big secret?" Bing Qingzi. Chapter 579. Sikongju sighed, "Speaking of which, we really have to thank that Nyoyud this time. If it wasn't for him seeing through us, we would still be in the dark. However, that Nyoyud is really powerful. I wonder how high his cultivation is. Let's put Nyoyud's matter aside. Who else knows about Yan Juexing?" Yin Baikong asked. Shangguan Taiping's disciple, Yulan Du, he was also at the scene and saw some clues. Right now, Zhongkai is escorting him to deliver the news. Sikongju replied. "Fool." Yin Baikong scolded and immediately made arrangements, before the news spreads, immediately send an order to all the branches to search for Yan Juexing's whereabouts. We must find him before anyone else. You will personally oversee this matter. Once you find Yan Juexing, you must capture him alive. I want to see what kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique he's hiding." Sikongju was slightly startled. He immediately understood his master's meaning. He shouldn't have left Yulan Du alive and let him deliver the news to Shangguan Taiping. How could such a heaven-defying cultivation technique fall into the hands of others? However, it was too late to regret now. A trace of regret flashed across Sikongju's face. He immediately cupped his hands and said, "I'll go arrange it now." Just as he turned around, he heard his master say with a gratified tone, "Your muddle-headed disciple, Guan Zhongkai, has done a good job. When he returns, I'll personally see him." Sikongju turned around and declined, "Master is overpraising me. He made 2 mistakes previously, and this disciple has already thickened his face to protect him. This time, he's only atoning for his mistakes. How would I dare to let Master see him personally?" Sikongju didn't report Guan Zhongkai's 2 mistakes to his master. Although it was within his authority, he didn't think that he could hide it from his master. Since it was already mentioned, he naturally had to make it clear. He was very clear about his master Yin Baikong's character. These words of praise were actually a test. If he didn't know about Guan Zhongkai's mistakes, then he would be an idiot. Yin Baikong gave a non-committal N. Sikongju sneaked a glance and saw that his master's expression had eased up quite a bit. He was even more certain that his master was just testing him. His back was already drenched in cold sweat. Yin Baikong waved his hand at him, and Sikongju quickly descended the mountain, the origin of the Redbud Kingdom's name was because there was a sea of redbud flowers that covered an area of several hundred miles in the kingdom. The people in the country liked to climb high mountains to see the endless sea of Chinese redbud flowers. The red and green colors were pleasing to the eye. However, they could only watch from afar and were not allowed to enter. Even the nobles were the same. This forbidden area had existed for many years. Although the imperial court had given strict orders, it was still too vast. It was impossible to send people to guard it. Thus, there were often people who wanted to sneak in to see what was going on, but those who entered usually never returned. Gradually, although this gorgeous sea of redbud flowers was pleasing to the eye, it also seemed somewhat strange, and no one dared to trespass. In the depths of the sea of redbud flowers, in a place that was difficult for outsiders to see, there was actually a stretch of magnificent buildings. Inside the main building, the Grand Redbud Flower Palace, the mid-soul formation cultivator Shangguan Taiping had just received a message from his disciple, Yulan Du. After recovering from his shock, he was now pacing back and forth alone in the hall, constantly muttering the three words, Yin Bai Kong. Of course, he wanted to obtain the peerless magic art that could dominate the world. However, this news had already fallen into Yin Bai Kong's hands. Although he was the second to know, he knew that with the World Commerce Association interfering, this piece of meat would not belong to him. Presumably, the World Commerce Association had already taken action. What worried him the most was that the Great Snow Mountain where Bing Qingzi, who was currently ranked third in the cultivation world, lived was not far from here. It was a neighboring country. If he interfered in this matter, Bing Qingzi might be the first to deal with him. This would not be fun. Although Bai Changchun has the ability to dominate the cultivation world, he has never had such great ambitions. Now that everyone is living in peace, this is good. If the likes of Yin Bai Kong were to have such strength, I'm afraid there would be no place for me to stand. I didn't expect Bing Qingzi to be such an ambitious person. Shangguan Taiping folded his arms and laughed to himself, muttering, this matter must be known to the people of the world. Humph. Whoever wants to dominate the cultivation world has to ask the consent of the cultivators of the world. Finished speaking, he turned around and strode towards the rear hall. He had already made his decision. No matter how tempting this fruit was, he had to endure it. With his cultivation, there was no chance of him taking advantage of this opportunity. He had to spread this news as soon as possible, otherwise he might lose his life because of this news. Yin Bai Kong was not a good person. Man Hu and the others finally experienced the power of the World Commerce Association. Originally, with their cultivation, they would have reached the Great Snow Mountain in less than 3 days. However, after 3 days, they had only covered half of the distance. There was really no other way. Wherever there was a possibility of leading to the Great Snow Mountain, there were people from the World Commerce Association hiding everywhere. Along the way, they had already tried to be as low-key as possible. However, there were constantly people who disregarded their lives and forcefully obstructed them, as if they had received a death order. The 5 of them had already fought dozens of battles, killing at least 200 to 300 if not 400 to 500 enemies. Fortunately, with the cultivation of the 5 of them, they were able to grit their teeth and endure it, and nothing happened to them. Now that things had come to this, it was clear that the entire World Commerce Association had been mobilized. Once their whereabouts were exposed, there were more and more people intercepting them. The opponent's cultivation was also getting higher and higher. Among the people they encountered, the number of experts at the late tribulation passing stage was gradually increasing. This was not a good sign. In a dense forest, the 5 people were hiding. From their appearance, they seemed to be in a somewhat sorry state. Number 5, Number 6, and Number 7 stood in a triangle, vigilantly watching their surroundings. Yan Juexing, who was surrounded by the 3 of them, was sitting cross-legged. If one looked closely, they would discover that he was not actually sitting on the ground. He was still a few inches off the ground, floating up and down slightly with his eyes closed. 7 poisonous snake-like black fiendish auras were swimming around his body. Within each black fiendish aura, there was a faintly discernible blood light flashing, appearing exceptionally strange. At the side, Man whose expression was solemn as he carefully guarded Yan Zhuixing, like a personal bodyguard. In the past few days of battle, they had continuously killed several late tribulation passing stage experts. To others, it was not a big deal if they could kill him. But to Yan Zhuixing, who cultivated demonic arts, a late tribulation passing stage nascent soul was an excellent tonic. None of the nascent souls he had devoured before had such a high cultivation. Including the 6 late tribulation passing stage experts, Yan Zhuixing had already devoured the nascent souls of more than 10 tribulation passing stage experts in 2 days. Man Hu and the others were the first to see this bloody scene of devouring. They were somewhat shocked, but they were already numb to it and did not find it strange. But what was worse was that eating too much tonic was not a good thing. If it was any other time, they would naturally be eager. But at this critical moment when they were escaping, Yan Zhuixing suddenly discovered that it was time for his demonic eyes to make a breakthrough. The opening chapter of the demonic book said, "Follow one's nature and become a demon." Once the opportunity arrives, one will immediately become a demon. The general meaning was that cultivating the demonic book was about following one's nature. If there was an opportunity to make a breakthrough, one must seize it and not miss it. Once the opportunity was missed, it would be wasted. Yan Zhuixing naturally could not miss such a good opportunity. It should be known that every inch of progress in the demonic book would bring him unimaginable benefits. So at this critical moment, he still decided to make a breakthrough. And Man Hu and the others had nothing to say, they could only do their best to help. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. A series of high-speed flying sounds swept past the top. The few of them immediately held their breaths. After the sounds faded, they saw Old Seven, who was staring at the gaps between the leaves above, angrily say, "It's Ouyang Da's people from the great Liao nation." They also interfered. "This is expected. I have already contacted Master again and informed him of the situation. Master has already set off from the Great Snow Mountain to pick us up. Don't say too much and be careful." Man Hu said calmly. The other 3's faces were filled with joy. Master had personally made a move. They suddenly felt a lot more confident. With Master's cultivation, it would take at most half a day to get here. On the first day, everyone only met people from the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. They did not see any other forces interfering. The few of them thought that Yin Baikong wanted to monopolize the demonic book and purposely controlled the spread of the news. This was a good thing for them, who were escaping. After all, no matter how big the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce was, it was still limited. However, before the second day arrived, they discovered that outstanding heroes were everywhere. There were people flying everywhere to search for them, forcing them to hide in all directions. If Yu Qianqiu knew about this, he would definitely laugh very happily. Back then, he was forced into the misty forest by people like this. Now that he could let Yan Zhuixing have a taste of this, how could he not be happy? The 7 black fiends that were circling around Yan Zhuixing suddenly moved faster. The 4 of them looked over and saw Yan Zhuixing's chest suddenly expand. He took a deep breath and the 7 black fiends entered his nostrils in a blink of an eye. Then, his eyes moved slightly. Just as he opened his eyes, they saw a red glow that seemed to be overflowing. When he opened his eyes, the red glow overflowed and completely covered his eyes. Man Hu and the other 3 stared at his eyes and felt like their souls were captivated. They felt like they couldn't control themselves. Just as the 4 of them were shocked, the red glow quickly disappeared. Yan Zhuixing's eyes had already returned to normal. They were still pitch black. The 4 of them also calmed their minds in an instant. However, they still looked at each other with lingering fear. Man Hu asked softly, "Young Palace Master, have you already broken through?" "I have already cultivated to the realm of demon eye ecstasy," Yan Zhuixing said with a cold expression. The few of them revealed expressions of joy. They did not find his cold reaction strange at all. This was because every time he cultivated, he would have this reaction. Everyone was already used to it. Unbeknownst to them, when Yan Zhuixing's demon eye was shining with red light, there was an early-stage tribulation passing cultivator hovering in the sky. As he scanned the dense forest, he suddenly discovered a red light flashing through the gaps in the forest. It immediately aroused his vigilance, and he stealthily came over here. Chapter 580. At this time, Yu Qianqiu had already left Lan City with Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had both made great contributions and received praise from their master. They were naturally in a good mood and were even more respectful towards Niu Yud. But what made the two more depressed was that this Niu Yud was still half dead on the road. He clearly had such a high level of cultivation, but he refused to speed up. Instead, he continued to fly on a broken flying sword. What was worse was that he kept stopping along the way. It was no different from a sightseeing tour. So Guan Zhongkai said weakly, "Senior Niu, if we keep going like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the World Chamber of Commerce by the time the cornucopia gathering starts." Unexpectedly, Niu Yud raised his eyebrows and said, "What? You think I'm flying too slow? If I fly too fast and you lose me, and I can't find the way to the World Chamber of Commerce, don't blame me for not keeping my word after taking the money." Yulan secretly smiled. He didn't care. He actually wanted Niu Yud to slow down. It was best if he didn't go to the World Chamber of Commerce. No, I was wrong. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly blocked in front of him and smiled apologetically. "Walk slowly, no rush, no rush." If he really lost Niu Yud, the consequences were not something he could bear. If he was slow, then so be it. At least he could push the blame onto Niu Yud when it was late. It had nothing to do with him. Humph. Niu Yud gave him an unhappy look. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to fly fast, but his cultivation was only so high. No matter how fast he went, he couldn't go very fast. In the end, because of these few words, "Fine." This Niu Yud simply had Yulan by 3 horses and rode them slowly on the ground. He could walk dozens of li in a day. Yulan was naturally happy to cooperate. Guan Zhongkai was about to cry. He was just short of calling him ancestor. "I told you to slow down, but not this slow method. How long would it take to reach the World Chamber of Commerce? If he was this slow, it would be strange if he was fine. He would definitely be taught a lesson when he returned." So Guan Zhongkai tried to persuade him with kind words, but Niu Yud only said that he was tired of flying and didn't want to fly anymore. In the end, the former begged for a long time before agreeing to his method of using a flying artifact. Sitting on the flying Dharma artifact, Yu Qianqiu was carefree, but he did not stop. Every once in a while, he would force the two of them to inquire about Yan Zhuixing, to see if he had been captured. Fortunately, this was not a difficult matter for Guan Zhongkai. With the World Chamber of Commerce's information network in various countries, it was very easy for him to obtain the latest news. In this large area of space, there was a person observing every 1 kilometer, because Yan Zhuixing and the other 4 had disappeared within this area. He was just one of them. However, coincidentally, Yan Zhuixing and the others who were being apprehended were right below him. He did not know if this was his opportunity to render meritorious service or his misfortune. A sky-shaking sound arrow was quietly held in his hand. If there really was a target down there, he wouldn't need to risk his life. As long as he sent a signal, he would have made a great contribution. After that, a large number of experts would gather here. If he captured Yan Zhuixing, his contribution would be even greater. Silently and gently, he approached the dense forest below. However, the vegetation in this forest was really dense. He had already reached the treetops, but he couldn't see the scene below clearly. He stretched his head left and right, trying to see what was happening below through the gaps between the branches and leaves without alerting his target. However, he was in the light, and the area covered by the towering trees was very dark. This was how people's visual reaction was. It was difficult to see anything in the dark from the light, but it was very clear from the light from the dark. He had clearly seen a red light flash before, and he was definitely not seeing things. However, there was no movement at all now. Without a choice, he tightened his grip on the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, ready to send a signal at any time. His body tried to avoid rubbing against the branches and leaves as he slowly descended. Although the movement from touching the branches and leaves was very small, what were the cultivations of Man-Hu and the others? They were much taller than him, and in addition, they were constantly on guard, so they immediately sensed the faint movement. The four of them looked up at the top of Yan Juexing's head at the same time. Yan Juexing's cultivation was not as good as the four of them, so he did not notice anything at first. However, the four of them's actions undoubtedly indicated something. He slowly raised his head and looked up. The light from the branches and leaves was flickering, and he could vaguely see a person diving down. The seventh brother had a fierce expression as he prepared to kill him. Man-Hu quickly signaled his three juniors to not act blindly without thinking, and transmitted his voice. Everyone hide well, he has a whistling arrow in his hand. Wait for him to come down before making a move. Don't give him a chance to send a signal. The four of them quietly hid behind a big tree, ready to launch a sneak attack. However, they discovered that Yan Juexing slowly stood up in the air, and did not have the slightest intention of hiding. Man-Hu anxiously transmitted his voice. Young palace master, don't beat the grass and alert the snake. Don't worry, I just wanted to test the power of the demon eye ecstasy. Yan Juexing raised his head and looked up, just in time. Just as he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly blossomed with a demonic red light. The cultivator who had dived down had mixed into the shade of the trees, and had gradually adapted to the darkness below. Stealthily pushing aside the last eyesore in front of him, he focused his gaze and looked down. What surprised him was that there seemed to be someone looking at him from below. From the light that leaked out, he could see the glimmer in the other party's eyes. In that instant, the pair of ice-cold eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic and breathtaking red light. It reflected directly into his eyes, and then he couldn't see anything, only his eyes were filled with red. His consciousness instantly fell into a coma, and when he suddenly woke up, he discovered that he was in a boundless sea of blood. Panic, fear, and he wanted to shout loudly, and he wanted to struggle with all his might. However, he discovered that he could not shout, and his limbs were so heavy that he could not even move a finger. At this moment, a light suddenly appeared in the distant sea of blood, and it seemed to be an escape route. Come over, come over, come over. In the direction of the exit, there were people constantly calling out to him, and then he involuntarily floated over. Man-Hu and the other three stared nervously in this direction. Once the other party sent out a signal, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was not like before. At that time, it was only the World Commerce Association that was chasing, but now, all the powers had come to join in the fun. Yan Juexing's demonic eye activated, and when the red light lit up, the four of them felt their minds ripple. Fortunately, it was not targeted at the four of them, so it did not affect them much. Yan Juexing stretched out his hand towards the person hiding behind the tree, and softly called out, "Come over." The voice was like a sleep-talking murmur, like a mother calling her naughty son home for dinner, harmless and warm. As for the person behind the tree, he pushed aside the tree branches, and slowly floated towards Yan Juexing with a dazed look in his eyes. He was still holding the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, but it did not have any effect. Instead, he stiffly loosened his fingers, and the arrow fell onto the thick layer of leaves. The red light in Yan Juexing's eyes had already disappeared, and his eyes had turned into an abnormally terrifying blood-red color. It made one's scalp tingle, and it did not look like a human's eyes. That cultivator quietly floated in front of Yan Juexing, and with a silly smile, he stared at that pair of blood-red eyes. Yan Juexing stretched out his hand, and gently stroked his face. His movements were very gentle. Just as the smile on that cultivator's face grew wider, the blood red in Yan Juexing's eyes faded, and he regained his cold and emotionless look. That cultivator immediately became confused, as if he could not find his way. Man-Hu and the other three were no longer affected when Yan Juexing withdrew the red light in his eyes. But they still stared dumbfoundedly at this abnormally strange scene. Suddenly, Yan Juexing's hand that was caressing the other party changed from gentle to sinister 5 claws. With a lingering killing intent, it pierced into the lower half of the other party's face with a crack. From the nose to the entire chin, it was completely wrapped in this claw. Fresh blood flowed out uncontrollably. That cultivator felt the pain, and his eyes instantly regained clarity. Then, they bulged out, filled with disbelief. Struggle, but with half of his face being grabbed, how could he struggle free? The more he struggled, the more pain he felt. He could not even make a sound of pain or cry for help. His nose and mouth were grabbed by the other party, so how could he make a sound? Gotcha, half of his face was crushed together, and a bloody hole appeared on the lower half of his face. The breath exhaled from the bloody hole blew out a blood bubble, and with a "pew," it burst. That person almost fainted from the pain, and lost control of his body. Just as he was about to fall, Yan Juixing expressionlessly clenched his 5 claws into a fist, and lightly shouted, "Little devil fist." A fist imprinted on the other party's chest. Bang! The sound was not too loud, and it was only a muffled sound. Obviously, the strength was controlled perfectly. However, that cultivator exploded into pieces in an instant, and blood rained down on the ground. Yan Juixing, who was floating in the forest, expressionlessly shook off the blood on his hand. The strange thing was that his hand did not seem to be stained with blood. He just shook it, and there was not even a trace of blood on his hand. He glanced at the direction where the 4 of them were hiding, and as if nothing had happened, he said, "State Preceptor, let us continue on our way." The 4 of them walked out silently, and looked at the scattered red on the ground. They were still in a daze. They did not expect the devil eye to be so powerful, to be able to directly control people. It was a little too scary. First it was the devil eye, then the devil claw, and finally the little devil fist, which easily solved the problem. The 4 of them thought back to that scene. If it was used on them, they did not know if they could block it. Just thinking about it made them feel a chill down their spines. OL-6 picked up the sky-shaking arrow, and put it in his storage bag. Man Who laughed bitterly, and waved his hand, "Let's go. Fly close to the ground in the forest. Although the speed is much slower, at least it is safer. I hope I can meet Master soon." After saying that, he identified the direction and flew away. The 4 of them followed closely behind him. The 5 of them fluttered in the forest, avoiding the trees in front of them. Looking at Yan Juixing's flying speed, he was actually not any slower than them, but there was a layer of black light wrapped around his body. This was the flying movement technique from the demonic book, Devil Light Glimpse. Otherwise, with his cultivation, there would be a big gap if he wanted to keep up with the speed of the 4 of them. Chapter 581. That's strange. Where did this Nyoyud come from? Why haven't I heard of him before? In the sacred palace of Baiwan Nation, when Lanfeng had an incredulous look on his face as he sat in the palace carved from jade. After the news about Yan Juixing came out, when Lanfeng was also shocked. However, he was not interested in robbing others. Instead, he found it unbelievable that Nyoyud could see through Yan Juixing's background. He was the young man that Bing Qingzi brought with him some time ago. At that time, when Lanfeng was a little surprised and couldn't help but take a few more glances. He didn't pay much attention to him when he found that he was just a small cultivator in the early stage of passing calamity. However, Nyoyud could see something else. Could it be that his cultivation was higher than his? He was disdainful of Nyoyud's actions in the ghost village. He thought that Nyoyud was at most a liar with a decent cultivation. He didn't expect him to be so capable. Nongju sat on the side and peeled the green fragrant seed, speechlessly. It was a kind of hard-shelled nut the size of a fingernail. After opening it, there was white and plump flesh inside, which tasted very fragrant and delicious. This kind of nut could only be found in the sacred land of the Wen family. It couldn't grow anywhere else. Although the nut was hard, with Nongju's cultivation, it was easily opened with a light pinch. The white flesh popped into her mouth. He sat on the chair and chewed. Looking at Wen Lanfeng, who was frowning and thinking, he didn't know what to say. He didn't expect it either. He didn't agree to help Yu Qianqiu kill Yan Juixing. In the end, as soon as he left the restaurant, Yu Qianqiu killed Yan Juixing. This kid really did what he said he would do. He didn't hesitate at all. But wasn't the commotion a little too big? They were trying to kill Yan Juixing. What kind of magic art could dominate the cultivation world? Was it so mysterious? Ruthless. He didn't do it himself, but let all the cultivators in the world do it together. Nongzhu. I'm impressed. It's said that you are very popular in the cultivation world. I didn't expect you to know this Niu Yud who appeared out of nowhere. You really have a wide circle of friends. Can you tell me who this person is? Wen Lanfeng asked with a smile. Nongzhu knew that she couldn't hide the fact that she met Niu Yud in his territory. She shook her head and said, Old one. Who cares where he came from? It's not like he's in your way. What are you worrying about? You can't say that. I have a favor to ask from him. I want you to help me build a bridge, Wen Lanfeng said seriously. Nongzhu's expression froze. She asked suspiciously, Do you have a favor to ask of him? Beg him for what? Limit-breaking pill. Wen Lanfeng sighed and said, I shouldn't be so greedy, but I can't always protect the entire Wen family. There will come a day when I have to leave. He had to make some plans for the Wen family. Can you ask him to sell me some restriction-breaking pills? I'll pay him back. Nongzhu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What limit-breaking pill? Who knows if it's a poison or a panacea? In short, it's a scam. Why do you have to give him money? She paused and said with a wry smile, Listen to me. Anyway, as long as it's something made by Niu Yud, you'd better not touch it. It's not as good as you think. Is it fake? Wen Lanfeng was shocked. Nongzhu waved her hand and said, I don't know whether it's fake or not. Anyway, I advise you to restrain your Wen family. Don't get involved in Niu Yud's business. There are only benefits. You just need to watch the fun from the sidelines. By the way, just keep it to yourself. Don't let anyone else know about it. The meaning was very clear. Wen Lanfeng would be an idiot if he still didn't understand. He nodded slightly and said, Thank you. Alas. I'm going back to Shantian Island. The sound transmission formation left by Nanming is still there. Keep in touch. Nongzhu said and left the temple, disappearing into the horizon. Yan Juixing and the others didn't know what the consequences of killing that cultivator would be. In fact, that cultivator was an observation point in this area. He was constantly in contact with people in other directions. It was equivalent to laying a net in this area. When the people in other observation points discovered that the person in this observation point had lost contact, they immediately spread the news. Not long after Man Hu and the others left, 40 to 50 cultivators above tribulation passing stage gathered from all directions. They were all disciples of the world commerce. After looking around, their attention immediately focused on the dense forest below. The person in the lead was Sikong Ju's fifth disciple, Zhang Zuansheng. Search below. Zhang Zuansheng waved his hand without hesitation. Dozens of people rushed into the forest below and found a dismembered corpse on the spot. A few disciples who were good at tracking quickly searched the area and soon found some clues. One of them reported to Zhang Zuansheng, Martial Uncle, from the scene, there are 5 different people's footprints. The number matches with Yan Juixing's. It should be done by Yan Juixing and the others. Zhang Zuansheng looked around and saw that the ground was covered in thick leaves. It didn't look like a place to leave footprints. He asked suspiciously, How can you be sure it's them? The disciple cupped his hands and said, It's hard to be sure. But when they killed our disciples, they shouldn't have exploded the corpses and scattered the blood everywhere. That's why they left footprints. Saying that, he raised a leaf with a bloody footprint and continued to explain, this was obviously left after they killed someone. Moreover, some of these footprints have one thing in common. When they left, they all headed in the same direction. He waved his hand and pointed southwest, over there. They went along this mountain range. Zhang Zuansheng nodded slightly. Southwest was where Di Rong Kingdom went. The two matched, so he made a prompt decision. The opponents are hiding in the forest and fleeing. Inform the people in the southwest to set up an ambush in the forest in front. We'll spread out and search southwest. They won't be able to escape. Remember, when you find someone, send the signal first. Under his command, 2 people flew into the sky to report. The other dozens of people formed a search line of nearly 1,000 meters and swept southwest. The movements of the World Commerce Association immediately attracted the attention of the other powers who were confused. Therefore, the direction of this mountain range immediately became the direction where the powers of the various countries gathered. People constantly entered the forest to search, and the sky was filled with people, almost forming an inescapable net. Man Hu and the other 4 who were fleeing clearly felt the pressure. They could see people in the sky almost constantly when they raised their heads. Moreover, people would occasionally enter the forest to search from all directions. This made it even harder for them to speed up, and they had to constantly hide and run. It was very obvious that the people chasing them had already discovered their precise route. Otherwise, it would not be so obvious in such a large mountain range. They never would have thought that it was because of Yan Zhuisheng's little devil fist exploding corpse that caused this disaster. With this torment, the 5 of them immediately felt miserable. From the looks of it, they might not be able to escape. The 5 of them were currently hiding in a concave wall at the bottom of a small hill. The hanging vines had concealed them, but this was only a temporary camouflage and could not last long. Old 7 asked somewhat anxiously, "Eldest senior brother, what do we do?" Man Hu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "What else can we do? If we really can't do it, we can only forcefully break out." Young Palace Master, do you have any ideas? The few of them looked at Yan Zhuisheng together, hoping that he would have a good idea. Yan Zhuisheng's face was cold as he suddenly gritted his teeth and said, "Niu Yud, I have no enmity with you. Why do you want to harm me?" The few of them revealed a trace of helplessness when they heard this. His words undoubtedly meant that he had no idea either. But who knew that they would hear him say, "I'll forcefully break out. You guys stay here. Their target is me. They won't do anything to you." The few of them were greatly shocked and said almost in unison, "No." Yan Zhuisheng waved his hand at them and said coldly, "Don't worry. If there aren't any soul formation experts, they might not be able to stop me. If I can escape, I'll naturally go to Snowy Mountain to find you guys." "No." Man Hu firmly denied, "All the forces are mobilizing on a large scale. It's impossible that there aren't any soul formation experts among them. It's too risky." "I have an idea," Old 6 suddenly said. The few of them looked at him and Old 7 said excitedly, "Sixth senior brother, what idea do you have? Quickly say it." Old 6 glanced at them and silently took out the sky-shaking whistle arrow from his storage bag. He said in a deep voice, "You guys continue to move forward secretly. I'll go in the opposite direction. I'll try my best to hold on for 2 hours and increase the distance between us. When the time comes, I'll release this whistle arrow and it will definitely attract everyone. When the time comes, you guys take the opportunity to quickly leave." The few of them looked at Old 6 in shock. He clearly wanted to sacrifice himself to attract the enemy so that they could escape. Imagine, if thousands of people found out that they were fooled by him, even if it was Yan Zhuisheng, who would let him go? No. Man Hu covered Old 7's mouth with his hand before he could even shout out. They could only hear the whooshing sound of people passing by above their heads. The few of them gritted their teeth and stared at Old 6. Even Yan Zhuisheng, who was usually calm, was moved when he looked at him. When there was no more movement, Man Hu extended his hand to Old 6 and said, "Give me the whistle arrow." Old 6 shook his head and hugged the whistle arrow tightly. He chuckled and said, "I'm still hoping that eldest senior brother will avenge me. Leave this matter to me." "Right, eldest senior brother, remember to take revenge for second senior brother. Give it to me. You're the senior brother. This kind of matter should be done by me, the junior brother." Old 7 stretched out his hand to snatch it. You guys leave quickly. Old 6 pushed Old 7's hand away. As he spoke, he also flashed out and sneaked in the direction he came from. Old 6. Sixth junior brother. Sixth senior brother. The few of them anxiously shouted in a low voice and did not dare to raise their voices. However, even if Old 6 heard them, he did not turn around and disappeared into the dense forest. The three of them silently lowered their heads with bloodshot eyes. Yan Juixing tightly shut his mouth and his chest rapidly heaved up and down. Man Hu suddenly waved his hand and said, "Go, don't waste Old 6's painstaking efforts." Out of the original 5 people, only 4 were left. The 4 figures quickly dashed into the forest. Chapter 582. High up in the sky, a white shadow flew out of the Di Rong Kingdom's territory at an incredible speed and entered the Purple Thistle Kingdom's airspace. This person was none other than Bing Qingzi. Following closely behind it was a white line that flung its tail in flight. It was the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon. At this moment, Bing Qingzi was burning with anxiety. After receiving the urgent situation report from his disciple, Man Hu, he did not stop and immediately set off from the Great Snow Mountain. Even the Snow Flood Dragon that had not left the Great Snow Mountain for thousands of years was brought down the mountain by him. He knew what the current situation was like. Even Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou, who were on his side, would fall out with him. His Great Snow Mountain lineage was not strong. Apart from him, only a few of his disciples had a higher cultivation. Furthermore, the guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon, was comparable to a mid-divine transformation realm cultivator. Now that things had come to this, he could only save Yan Juixing at all costs. If he did not try his best to save Yan Juixing, the curse on his body would not spare him. Even if he could abandon himself, he couldn't abandon his disciples. They were as close as father and son. Originally, the Snow Flood Dragon's cultivation could not keep up with Bing Qingzi's flying speed. However, the Snow Flood Dragon was born with the ability to ride the wind and break the waves. It already had the basic attributes of a dragon. It was born with speed. Although the Snow Flood Dragon could not speak, it had already gained intelligence and could feel its master's anxiety. Otherwise, he would not have brought it down the mountain and flown so frantically. On the other side of the Purple Thistle Kingdom, there was a mountain range. However, on this desolate mountain range, there were currently hundreds of people standing. Each of them stopped on the treetops, waiting for something. These people were all divine transformation realm lords of various kingdoms. They were not waiting for others, but for Bing Qingzi, who might pass by. There was a large-scale search going on ahead. Some people would definitely not allow Bing Qingzi to go over and interrupt them. For example, Yin Baikong, who had a calm expression. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes and glanced at Shangguan Taiping, who was on the treetops in the distance, with a somewhat resentful expression. Needless to say, who else but Shangguan Taiping could have spread the news to the whole world? This was equivalent to ruining his plans. Actually, he had wanted to leave first and kill Shangguan Taiping in the Purple Thistle Kingdom to prevent the news from leaking out. Who would have thought that Shangguan Taiping would be so cunning as to spread the news in advance? Soon after, it was rumored that the lords of the various kingdoms were moving out. Yin Baikong naturally couldn't sit still. He was very confident in his forces, but no matter how strong they were, they wouldn't be able to defend against so many soul formation stage cultivators. He was forced to personally come out to hold the line for the World Commerce Association. From time to time, a group of experts from the cultivation world looked around. He was afraid that those 2 people would appear. One was Bai Changchun of the Demon Domain and the other was Wen Lanfeng of the Baiwan Nation. If these 2 people were to come, some people's dreams would be shattered. In fact, there were many people who were eager for the 2 top experts of the cultivation world to appear because it was unlikely for them to get Yan Juixing. It would be better to let Yan Juixing fall into the hands of Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng so that everyone would be at ease. However, the 2 of them had yet to appear. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. This was an expert who truly had confidence in his own strength. They weren't interested in dominating the cultivation world at all and only believed in themselves. Now that things had come to this, many people had already secretly passed down orders to kill Yan Juexing on the spot if they found him. It would be best if their bones were ground to ashes, but their corpses couldn't fall into the hands of others. In any case, even if they got their hands on it, they would probably be attacked by others. Since they couldn't enjoy it, they might as well destroy it and maintain the status quo. Sikong-ju looked at his master's gloomy face and knew that he was in the wrong. When he received the news, he should have immediately asked Guan Zhongkai to kill Yulan at all costs. There wouldn't have been such trouble then. Now, even if the World Commerce Association got their hands on it, they would probably have to pay a huge price. A figure flew over from afar. After Mu Lianxiu bowed to Yin Baikong and his master, he transmitted his voice. Grandmaster, Master, our people have found traces of Yan Juexing and the others. However, there are too many forces following us. I'm afraid that even if we find Yan Juexing, it will be a little troublesome. Yin Baikong transmitted his voice expressionlessly. Those who are scattered, gather your strength. Lianxiu, go and pass down my decree. Inform all the branches to gather all the cultivators above tribulation passing stage to reinforce them. Sikong, go and hold the scene. Don't show mercy to anyone who dares to snatch it. Kill without mercy. I'll take care of everything. Yin Baikong was ruthless this time. How could he let others snatch the meat that was already in his hands? The two received the order and Mu Lianxiu rushed down the mountain to inform all the branches. Sikong-ju quickly flew in the direction of the search. The moment Sikong-ju moved, it became lively. There were many people watching this place. Almost 100 spirit-severing experts flew up and chased after Sikong-ju. This made Yin Baikong's teeth itch, but there was nothing he could do. He didn't have the ability to tell everyone not to move. Even if he spoke, they wouldn't listen to him. He wasn't by Changchun. Stone Jade City, the capital of Axi country. A banquet was already prepared in the guest hall of the World Commerce Association's Stone Jade City branch. Niu Yud, who was sitting at the head of the table, was eating and drinking to his heart's content. Yulan Do was in a good mood and happily poured wine for Niu Yud. Yulan Do was in a good mood and happily poured wine for Niu Yud. She didn't need to worry and just followed Niu Yud closely. Anyway, Guan Zhongkai would report the latest news later. It was really good to be able to keep up with the latest news of the cultivation world while having fun. As the two were eating and drinking, they suddenly heard the sound of dozens of people flying in the sky. They seemed to be in a hurry and from the sound, their cultivations weren't bad. The two looked at each other in shock and didn't know what happened. At this moment, Guan Zhongkai walked in quickly and said excitedly, Senior Niu, I found it. I found Yan Juexing's tracks. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He put down the pig trotter in his hand and asked hurriedly, Did you catch him or kill him? Guan Zhongkai sat down and shook his head. Not yet, but it should be soon. Since we found his tracks, it shouldn't be long before we catch him. That's true. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and continued to eat the pig trotter. He thought that with so many people making a move, it would be difficult to catch him alive. He was afraid that many people would rather kill Yan Juexing than let him fall into the hands of others. Yulan Do asked casually, Brother Guan, what happened outside just now? It seems that many cultivators above the tribulation passing stage left. Did something happen? How could Guan Zhongkai reveal this matter? This was a decree from his grandmaster to gather people. He shook his head nonchalantly and said, It's nothing. Some blind people came to this branch and the manager went to gather people to support them. It's not a big deal. Yulan Do said, Oh. She was more or less confused. The three continued to eat the dishes on the table. In the dense forest, Zhang Zuanxing originally led dozens of people to search, but later, many people came to help. At this moment, there were hundreds of people advancing in the forest. Even the sky above the forest was followed by a group of people. There were 6 people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Old Six hid in a call not far away and quietly observed the movement in front of him. He originally planned to find a way to get further away and then release the whistling arrow. However, with such a dense group of people searching in front of him, there was no way to get past them. Counting the time, only an hour had passed. There was still nearly half of the time until the 2-hour deadline. Needless to say, looking at the situation here, eldest senior brother and the others weren't any better. With a bitter smile, Old Six took out the whistling arrow and retreated into the kernel, gritting his teeth. He raised the whistling arrow, found an opening above, and directly pulled it. Chirp. An ear-piercing sound rang out. A dazzling blue light rapidly rose from the forest into the sky. With a loud bang, a cloud of blue smoke exploded. It was like a blue mushroom cloud with a long trail below it, indicating where it came from. If it was at night, this mushroom cloud would emit a blue light to guide the way. The entire region was thrown into chaos. Everyone's eyes looked at the blue mushroom cloud. Someone took the lead and shouted, "The World Commerce Association has found the target. Charge over. Speed up, hurry. We can't let Yan Juexing fall into someone else's hands. Charge. Quickly go and support him." Shouts rang out everywhere. Everyone went crazy. There was no other way. Everyone had received a death order. In an instant, countless people swarmed in from all directions. The people who were searching in the forest in the distance all came out to check the direction and flocked in the direction of the blue mushroom cloud. Zhang Zuansheng and the others who were searching were all stunned when they saw a blue light rising not far away. Someone said in shock, "Someone found Yan Juexing in front?" This was the sky-shaking whistling arrow that only sounded when the target was found. Then, everyone saw a figure quickly flash to the left. Zhang Zuansheng shouted, "Catch him." Hundreds of people immediately chased after him. Looking down from the sky, the movements of these hundreds of people stirred up the forest. Bang was followed by a few screams. A few large trees fell down. It was already open. Some people who were watching from the sidelines, worried that it was a diversion, could no longer hold it in. The other side had clearly found the target. Both sides had already started fighting, so there was nothing to hesitate about. Therefore, they rushed over as fast as they could without any regard for their lives. The chaotic crowd rushed into the forest one after another. Just as the whistling arrow sounded out, Man Hu and the other 3 who were fleeing came to a stop with a jolt. Old Seven turned to look behind him and said with tears streaming down his face, "Sixth senior brother, didn't we agree on 2 hours? We haven't arrived yet. Hide." Man Hu, who also had tears streaming down his face, pulled him. The 4 quickly hid in a small cave. It was a very shallow and narrow cave. The 4 of them were tightly squeezed together. 3 out of the 4 people were crying silently. Yan Juexing's lips were tightly shut, and his face was stretched taut. Chapter 583. In his impression, other than a bit of affection between family members, there was no friendship between other relationships. In the cultivation world, most people used each other. Ever since he started cultivating devil skills, he had become more and more selfish. His personality had gradually become cold and he didn't believe in these things. However, what happened today had given him too much shock. Especially the heroic act of Old Six sacrificing himself to lure the enemy, it made his cold heart's blood boil. In this sect, although they weren't father and son, they were better than real father and son. Although they weren't brothers, they were better than real brothers. It was rare to see someone risking their life for a brother. It stirred people's hearts. The cruel sounds of fighting in the distance were intense. It was unknown how many people Old Six was facing right now. The straightforward Old Seven looked like a careless, boorish person, but at this moment, he was crying like a child and tightly covering his mouth. Old Five closed his eyes and forcefully pressed the back of his head against the soil. Tears silently slid down his face. Man Who had already bitten his lips until they bled. Hearing the movements outside, Yan Juexing looked at the 3 martial brothers and pursed his lips into a line. The muscles on his face twitched and he almost couldn't control his emotions. This kind of situation had never happened before, not to mention after cultivating demonic arts. Whoosh whoosh. Another wave of fast-flying sounds swept past above their heads. Then there was no more movement. Only the sounds of fighting came from the distance. This was probably the last wave. Those who should go had all gone. From today onwards, Old 2 and Old 6 grudge is my grudge. Yan Juexing's words jumped out one by one. His eyes were abnormally cold. If we don't leave now, when will we? Man who shouted in a low voice and decisively pushed the others out. The four of them quickly fled. The area below where the whistling arrows had come from had already been thrown into chaos. In just a few moments, several thousand people had charged over and rushed into the forest below like a swarm of bees. That scene was very lively. A large patch of the towering ancient trees had already fallen. Eldest martial uncle, stop the people from world commerce. Block the others for me. It's me. Watch carefully before you act. One side didn't want to let the other side take the lead, while the other side wanted to be first. The people who arrived first immediately helped out. The people who came later did not understand the situation at all. When they heard their fellow disciples calling out to them, they did not hesitate to help out. As a result, the battle became more and more intense. It had already become a chaotic battle. Seeing their fellow disciples fall one by one, everyone's eyes turned red with killing intent. As long as someone brushed past him, he would only recognize the clothes and not the person. Letting go would be a killing move. The most unlucky ones were the people from the World Commerce Association. Although they had a lot of people, they were besieged by the various powers. Because World Commerce had taken the initiative to stop the others, when those people's fellow sect members rushed over and saw their own people fighting with World Commerce, they didn't know who Yan Juexing was and thought that World Commerce had already captured him. They had come here to snatch people, so there was no need for words. Fight. When the other powers rushed over and saw that almost everyone was attacking World Commerce, they also thought that World Commerce had succeeded. Everyone is fighting for people, let's fight for them too. Fight. Those who came later saw that their fellow disciples were in such a state. How could they just stand by and watch? Helping their fellow disciples fight was definitely not wrong. Fight. Thus, the scene was like a rolling snowball as everyone threw caution to the wind. Although most people didn't know what was going on, it was the general trend. Occasionally, there would be some clear-headed people who wanted to stop, but they couldn't. If you didn't fight, someone would fight. If you wanted to fly up to the sky, there would immediately be a few people who would beat you down. Even a clay figurine had a temper. At this stage, if they didn't fight, they would be beaten. Other than fighting, what other choice did they have? Thousands of people fought together in a chaotic battle. It was a spectacular scene. Broken limbs were everywhere on the ground and blood dyed the forest. Behind them, there were still large numbers of people from the various powers rushing over to help. Zhang Zuanxing led several hundred people. From the start, he was the target of the various powers' attacks. At this time, he had already lost most of them. He could be said to be riddled with wounds. Although it wasn't a big deal, he had been harassed by all sorts of people. As for number 6, who was previously surrounded, no one knew where he was. He already had no time to care about himself, so why would he care about others? It was more like he didn't want his life anymore. Clang clang clang. Ah. I'll fight you to the death. Ah. Save me. The various lights and colors released by the artifacts were dazzling. Intense crashing sounds and miserable cries rang out everywhere. It didn't seem to stop. Right now, number 6 was also fighting in the chaotic battle. With his decent cultivation, he was fine. However, he also suffered many small injuries. The main reason was that the attacks were too concentrated. His clothes had become tattered. Blood splattered everywhere, covering his body. His face was already a mess. Who could recognize him? Actually, at this stage, with so many people coming and going, it was hard to tell who he was. Who could tell who he was? Yan Juixing? There were a few people present who had seen Yan Juixing before. Even if they knew number 6, who could tell him apart with his current appearance? They didn't have the time to do so. Flying swords and all kinds of magic weapons flew up like rabbits and fell like a cuckoo. The messy explosions made their ears buzz, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. Number 6 was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. What are they doing? Forget it. I thought I was dead for sure. Since I have a chance to escape, why stay here? Number 6 took the opportunity to size up the situation. He suddenly leaped up and saw the people fighting in the air, taking the opportunity to launch a few sword astral slashes. In an instant, 5 or 6 people attacked him, forcing him back. The moment he landed, the messy attacks came again. He drew his sword and quickly pointed it in all directions. Chaotic sword chi burst out and blocked the attacks. Since he couldn't get out from the top, he gritted his teeth and fought towards the outside. From the attacks just now, he could tell that the people fighting on the top had higher cultivation. It was too difficult to get out from the top. It was impossible for a single person to deal with so many experts. It was safer to rely on his own cultivation to get out from the side. On the Hengduan mountain range at the border of the Redbud Kingdom, a group of spirit-severing experts heard the rumbling sounds of battle from afar. From the sounds of it, it seemed like the battle had reached its climax. They didn't know what was going on. The reason why everyone was here was to put pressure on the lords of the other factions and prevent them from interfering. At this time, Yin Baikong was calm and composed. He squinted his eyes as he stared at the people rushing in from all directions. There was a hint of arrogance on his face. Most of these people were disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce. They had never gathered like this before. This was the first time they had displayed their strength so valiantly. However, good steel should be used on the blade's edge. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. If they didn't use it now, when would they? As more and more people arrived at the World Commerce Association, the expressions of many soul formation experts changed. Usually, people only knew that the World Commerce Chamber was powerful and influential. Now that there was an endless stream of people rushing over, it gave them a great visual shock. The World Commerce was indeed very powerful. Everyone knew that this was only the people who came from nearby. Those who came from further away should still be behind, and no one knew how many there were. Beside Yin Baikong, Hu Changshou's eyes flickered. Suddenly, both of them turned around at the same time. Qi Jiujuan, Ouyang De, and Pei Fong were the same. Pei Fong, who had lost a hand, laughed gloatingly. Bing Qingzi is here. The three of them looked at each other. They were somewhat excited, but there was no need to say anything. No matter how high Bing Qingzi's cultivation was, how could he be a match for so many soul formation experts? Once Bing Qingzi died, the three of them would benefit the most from this. Xiao. A high-speed flying sound that could only be produced by a soul formation final stage expert and above could be heard. All the soul formation experts turned around to look. Another soul formation final stage expert was coming from that direction. Who else could it be other than Bing Qingzi? The 5 soul formation final stage experts shot into the sky at the same time, forming a line to block the incoming person's path. Yin Baikong was the first to speak. Brother Bing, why are you in such a hurry? We have been waiting for you for a long time. Please stop for a chat. His chances of winning were the highest, so how could he let Bing Qingzi go now? He naturally had to find a reason to make Bing Qingzi stay. Moreover, the other 4 were on his side, so there was no need to be afraid of Bing Qingzi. Get out of my way. Before the person arrived, a wave of angry roars was the first to approach. As far as Chu Tian could see, there was a white dot rapidly approaching. Pei Fong, who had a broken palm, cackled, Bing Qingzi, if you know what's good for you, then stop. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Bing Qingzi arrived at this distance in an instant, but he did not show any signs of stopping. Their expressions changed. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi, who was flying towards them, shouted, "Profound Een Palm." His palms flew towards them like dancing butterflies. A monstrous wave surged, and the temperature in the air instantly dropped below the freezing point. The few of them turned pale with fright. They saw a sky full of transparent palm shadows rushing towards them. Each palm shadow was as big as a dinner table, and there were at least 300 to 400 of them. In an instant, they arrived in front of the 5 of them. The 5 of them were startled. They did not expect Bing Qingzi to attack them without any warning. There were 5 of them here. Wasn't he a little too daring? Because they had underestimated Bing Qingzi's determination, the 5 of them were not prepared to attack. They were all so scared that they immediately teleported away. What a joke! Bing Qingzi's strength was beyond doubt. Other than Wen Lanfeng, it was him. Moreover, this profound Een Palm was extremely insidious. It was a famous killer move that Bing Qingzi had cultivated by sitting on the Great Snow Mountain all year round and absorbing the cold air for thousands of years. Every time he used it, the cold poison in his body would be reduced. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. In short, it was very powerful. If they were hit by 1 or 2 palms, the 5 of them would probably have to go home to recuperate for a month or 2. How could they still fight here? The palm shadows disappeared, but the cold air was still there. Suddenly, there was a short burst of snowflakes floating in the clear sky, which looked colorful under the refraction of the sun. As soon as the 5 of them dodged, they saw Bing Qingzi rushing past them in a blur. Behind him was a huge white python that was as thick as a water bucket. Someone below exclaimed, "It's the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon." Bing Qingzi even brought it here. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.